it. Tapiwa. Okay, so they are, so welcome, welcome, welcome. People who are from regions north and all over the world online, and really want to really appreciate all of the faculty who have contributed with talks over these 2 days, as well as panelists who've come, given their time, their ideas and opinions. We really appreciate all of you. So in advance, thank you very much. So this session is dedicated to new products. We already heard we're learning new things about old products, right? So Cal raised the very important question of U equals U. This means when people who take treatment in a way that completely suppresses their virus, what we call undetectable. So on our lab methods of measuring viral load, it is undetectable. It is no longer seen. We say that person is non-infectious, 0 chance of passing on the virus to somebody else sexually. We know now that if they are under 1,000 copies, I'm taking you through the policy brief, so you know, under 1,000 copies, but above that detectable level. So copies are how much virus we can measure in the blood in a cubic ml. So if you think about when you have to take muti or you give your child muti, it's a teaspoon is 5 mLs. We measure in the blood how much virus particles we can see to give us a sense of, is that person virally suppressed? So there are 2 reasons for doing that. One, for the individual themselves. If the virus is completely low in bodies, then the body recovers and the immune system comes back, and that person can absolutely feel restored in terms of health, okay? And then the second good reason is that person can then know they are not infectious to their sexual partners, okay? And that's huge. So we have just established that, and there was many trials. There won't be any more trials. It is done, it is established, it is known for sexual transmission. And that's something to celebrate. Absolutely a wonderful. So there is a campaign saying, say 0, hashtag say 0. Don't say, I think, maybe, let's talk about it. Say 0 chance of getting HIV transmitted if people are undetectable. Okay, we were just talking about not even doctors are really, doctors who are HIV doctors are not embracing this. So let's start a ripple from this group going forward, that we want when you're sitting having lunch with somebody, say, I heard today. When you're at a dinner party, you know what went down? Let's spread the word, right? Because more and more people need to know this. Okay, that's doing that. But now we're going to concentrate on new products, particularly new products to prevent HIV. But there's also, as you heard, new products that are helping us treat people who find it hard to swallow a pill every day, maybe, or giving people options. Maybe they want to have an injectable for a time and then pill for a time, or vice versa. So we want those options, so that's what we'll be discussing. And to tell us about them, first of all, we have an expert in prevention and treatment coming, and I'll introduce her in a moment, but just so you know what the lineup is, we're not only discussing the new treatments, but also access to them, right? So because it's no good having something sitting in America and we don't have it for use here, or sitting in the Glengarriff pharmacy at a big cost in Sea Point, and it's not in our clinics where we are, right? So we're also talking about access, and Sebastien will be bringing new ideas from the medicine patent pool and helping us understand what that is, because I think we also have to understand what are the ways we can bring these products into the public sector. And then we were having a talk about a new product that isn't actually immediately with us, but also to give you a sense of how we're thinking about these new products and how they could possibly become more usable in the future. So there's what have we got now? What are we doing about it? And looking into the future. Okay. And then we have a really exciting panel who I know are going to be provocative around what is our role in terms of activism, advocacy? What do we know? What more can we be doing in terms of making sure we have optimized care? Africa does not have to be with a begging bowl in the back of the queue, right? How do we get to where our rightful place is, the best care for the people of Africa? Okay, so that is the start. I'm going to now call on my good colleague and friend, Dr. Sheetal Kassim. She's a principal investigator, senior research officer at the DTHF, and she's going to share really what are our new prevention and treatment options and the R&D with them. Over to you, my dear.
Sorry, I'm very short. I hope you can see me over the podium. The blocks. Okay, so thanks, good morning. As Prof. Bekker mentioned, my presentation is going to serve to as an introduction to what we have now and what's upcoming in the field of HIV prevention and treatment. And it's going to lead into what's going to be a very exciting and provocative discussion about access. So I want to mention oral PrEP. We know that oral PrEP is what we have available. We know that uptake is good, and this is data from AVAC on PrEP Watch, and you can see that Africa is not doing too bad in terms of uptake of PrEP. The issue, though, is persistence. And of course, this may be due to a number of factors, stigma, challenges with taking a daily oral pill, lifestyle choices, and ease of access. So what we currently have available in terms of biomedical prevention is PrEP. And what's new and approved is the dipivirine vaginal ring and long-acting injectable cabotegravir. So I'm going to show you another slide just now that shows where these things are approved. But remember that approval doesn't necessarily equal access. And then in the future, we're looking at another long-acting injectable, and then I'm going to touch quickly on BNABs because it's in my presentation, but I know another speaker is going to talk about it. So we have oral PrEP, uptake is relatively good. So why do we need other methods? This is old data, but it's good data. It's from one of our colleagues, Catherine Gill, the U2 study, and it's looking at acceptability of delivery methods of PrEP. So the green is the pill, the blue is the ring, and the red is the injection. Obviously, we can see the blue and the red are performing well across all categories. And again, having options means that we can have choice. And from a biomedical perspective, we have options because we look at issues like interactions, availability, cost implications. And having all those options will then obviously lead to choice. And we've been talking about choice a lot, so I'm not going to elaborate further. But what's important about having the options and registering these options is translating that into choice depends on us, advocates, policymakers, to actually make these things available. So this is not new information. We know this, that daily oral adherence and persistence, especially in younger people, is a challenge. Stigma from partners, from family, from neighbors about taking a daily pill and what it means is still there. And then health system demands about taking an oral PrEP regimen or even an oral ART regimen means more frequent clinic visits. And that means that we need a longer acting PrEP medicine and a longer acting ARV medication. And that is a very important option for people who are not benefiting from daily medication. So this map, sorry if it's a bit unclear on the screen, that's Africa. The dark blue shows the countries where at least 3 products for PrEP are registered. So it's Truvada or the generic, the dipivirine vaginal ring, and CAB for prevention. And then the light blue is 2 products approved, and then the light green is only oral PrEP approved for use. So what we can see is that, again, we have 3 products available in South Africa, in Zim, But are they actually available to people? No. Currently, what we only have available is the oral PrEP here in South Africa, and then the Depivirine vaginal ring through demonstration projects, CAB-LA only through research studies and implementation projects. Okay, so in terms of oral medication, what's upcoming is our multipurpose prevention technology, which is a dual prevention pill. It's currently being developed for daily oral use to prevent both pregnancy and HIV. And what's important is that this is going to provide incentive for people to actually go and get their pills. It's initially being developed to start in Eastern and Southern Africa, where the incidence is the highest, and it could increase the uptake of oral PrEP and mitigate stigma, hopefully, because this pill is a contraception as well as an HIV prevention method. Those timelines are a bit out, I think, but trials are currently underway for the dual prevention pill, DPP. Okay, the ring. So the ring is a flexible, one-size-fits-all vaginal ring, and it slowly releases an antiretroviral called Depivirine into the vagina over a period of 1 month. It's our first long-acting HIV prevention option, and what's exciting about it is it's user-controlled. It's very discreet, and women like it, prefer it to the pill. So when we look at our public health impact, modeling data shows that prevention methods with even moderate efficacy would have a meaningful impact as part of a comprehensive strategy that could avert millions of infections. That means that the ring would prevent acquisitions among women who would otherwise not be averted by any other method, for example, if they weren't taking their oral PrEP. So new user-centered options like the ring is very crucial for us. Okay, injectables. So we've spoken a bit about cabotegravir as PrEP. So what cabotegravir is an ARV also. So it's a medication, one of the medications that has been developed for the treatment of HIV, and it's an integrase strand transfer inhibitor. Cabotegravir long-acting is given 2 monthly as an injection into the buttock. It's been approved for PrEP for HIV in the USA in July 2021, and congrats to Zimbabwe, who was the first African country to have CAB-LA approved. It's obviously a great advantage over daily pill taking. And in South Africa and in Zim, it's approved as a drug called Apretude. Unfortunately, it's not available yet in our public sector. So I wanted to just highlight the trials. There's been a lot of talk about how we as researchers, how can we influence policy and how can we advocate for these medications to be available? So the 2 big trials that were done on PrEP was HPTN 083 and HPTN 084, both done by the DTHF and other sites in Africa. And these trials showed that cabotegravir worked better than oral PrEP, whether it was due to adherence issues, probably, with oral PrEP. But in HPTN 083, in the cabotegravir arm, 66% lower HIV incidence than in the oral PrEP arm. In HPTN 084, it was a bit higher than that. And HPTN 084 was done in Africa for young women who needed the injection. There are ongoing sub-studies that are happening, and that's looking at more at acceptability, at feasibility, and also, very interestingly, there's a study that's looking at cabotegravir in pregnancy, which is important. We mustn't forget about our young pregnant people. And the innovation of injectables for treatment. There's a need for more convenient, less frequent treatment to help address challenges associated with daily oral HIV treatment. So the young ladies before did mention that an HIV injection that you get every 2 months is a game changer. It's a game changer for treatment, and it's a game changer for achieving viral suppression. Injection as a delivery method for medication is really not a novel concept. We know about about contraceptions. We have a variety of contraceptions available, and people choose what works best for them. So it's easily administered by healthcare workers, and the same can be done with the injectable ART. The challenge is implementing these injectable ARTs once it's approved into our clinic settings, and how we can encourage people to be able to advocate and deliver these methods. Currently, it is approved by the FDA, not yet in South Africa, but it's approved as Cabenuva. It's 2 injections every 2 months. It is approved in just approved in South Africa. Sorry, thank you. 2 injections every 2 months, 1 in each buttock. The medication is cabotegravir, which we spoke about for the prevention, and rilpivirine, which is another long-acting ARV method. The studies have been done that 2 monthly dosing is the same as 1 monthly dosing. There's no difference. So obviously a 2 monthly dosing was a preferred option. Now we can talk about the other injectable, lenacapavir. So lenacapavir for PrEP and for treatment, I'll touch on both. Lenacapavir is a first-in-class HIV capsid inhibitor, and I'm going to talk about how that works a little bit later. It's available as a tablet and a 6-monthly depot injection. So 6 monthly subcutaneously, meaning just under the skin, usually given in the abdomen. And it's used for both treatment and prevention in trials currently. And it really, this graph shows how the len level really persists up to 6 months. Lenacapavir as HIV treatment is ongoing in 2 trials. So one for people who are heavily treatment experienced, who were using ARVs already, and another trial for treatment naive people. The downside of the lenacapavir for treatment is that you still have to take a daily pill of another ARV with your 6 monthly injection. So why I'm bringing this up is because we still need formulations that can be used with lenacapavir for treatment. And that's why we continue to look. We think we have the gold standard always, but we always have to investigate, and we always have to find new products to add to our method mix. Anyway, lenacapavir shows to really virologically suppress. So in the heavy treatment experienced people, 78% of individuals on 6 monthly lenacapavir injection and daily oral pill were suppressed. And in the treatment naive people, 90% of them were suppressed. So I mentioned it's a novel HIV capsid inhibitor. So it inhibits HIV at multiple points in the viral life cycle. So when HIV enters your body, it goes through this whole process of getting into your cells and replicating. And what ARVs do is it really stops and blocks the replication. So what another interesting thing about lenacapavir is that the virus produced in the presence of lenacapavir is not able to, are malformed and not able to replicate. Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about the trials that we're doing at the moment for PrEP, lenacapavir as PrEP. So we know about low uptake and high rates of discontinuation, as I've said, with oral PrEP, and efficacy is linked to adherence for a daily oral regimen, and that's affected by multiple factors, which I've mentioned before. So the Purpose 1 and Purpose 2 trials are actually looking at lenacapavir 6 monthly for the prevention of HIV. As I mentioned before, lenacapavir has been used in HIV treatment, and in the treatment trials, at least 800 injections were administered, and the side effect profile of lenacapavir is really good. The most disconcerting side effect is that you have to get this injection under the skin of your tummy, and sometimes it can be really sore, and sometimes it can, like, you can get a little nodule. It is really sore, and you can get a little nodule that lasts, like a little bump under the skin of your tummy, lasts a couple of weeks to months. But the benefit far outweighs, if you like it, far outweighs that side effect of pain, initial pain. So the Purpose trials are still ongoing. Actually, they're pretty new and they're very exciting. lots of us here may be doing Purpose 1, and at our site at Grooteskies, we're doing Purpose 2. So this is a trial design for Purpose 1, and we are looking at lenacapavir given 6 monthly for 1 year or placebo. And then the other arm will get Truvada, right? So every person in the study for the first year has to take an injection and a pill, unfortunately, because there's a placebo here. And then once they do the analysis, after everybody has completed 1 year, we move on to the open label lenacapavir, subcutaneously 6 monthly. So the Purpose 1 study is looking at adolescent girls and young women aged 16 to 25 years old, and the Purpose 2 study is focused on cis men, transgender women, and gender non-conforming people who have sex with men. And the difference with Purpose 2 is that there's green arm that doesn't apply. So Purpose is very exciting. I don't have any data to share with you yet, but just watch the space. It's lenacapavir is the new kid on the block, and it promises to give some good results. I'm going to quickly talk about BNABs because I know another presenter is going to talk about it, but everyone is talking about BNABs at the moment. What are BNABs? So antibodies are what your body naturally produces against infection, right? It's a part of our body's natural defense mechanism. Researchers have found that BNABs, broadly neutralizing antibodies for HIV, can block a wide range of HIV strains if delivered mostly intravenously, right? So this shows the HIV protein. It's a very complicated slide, but what I wanted to highlight is there's multiple parts of HIV that we can attack or target with broadly neutralizing antibodies. We've done a trial. There's trials being done on a specific broadly neutralizing antibody called VRC01. Nobody has to remember that name, but basically it was a proof of concept trial. And this showed that these antibodies were safe and well tolerated. And they actually did protect against HIV in a certain select subset of HIV strains that were highly sensitive to this antibody. So then that led to the question, what else can we do? How can we improve on this trial to inform future research? How can we improve on this trial to inform vaccine development? And also, how are we looking at BNABs? And I'm sure our next speaker is going to talk about it, to be able to scale and for them to be available to the entire population and the people who need it. This is just timeline and development of what is currently happening with broadly neutralizing antibodies. And it just shows that there are multiple antibodies in development at the moment. So looking at the years ahead, so the vaginal ring is approved in most places. We need to look at how we can access it and how we can make it available. Oral PrEP, we know about oral PrEP. It's at scale, but we need to address the issue of persistence. Looking at a dual prevention pill, that might be something that can address some of the stigma associated with oral PrEP for people who prefer to take oral medication. And then the long-acting injectables. What's nice about these trials that I mentioned, HPT and 084 and 083, is that now that the trials are done, the medication is still available for trial participants. So people are still receiving cabotegravir long-acting 2 monthly for HIV prevention as an open label extension part of the trial. And then I'm not going to talk about vaccines because we're not really there yet, but it is in the pipeline. There are multiple phase 1 studies going on about vaccines and antibodies. And lenacapavir, watch this space for this new 6 monthly injectable. So in summary, there is an unmet need for a more diverse PrEP offering for people who are at substantial risk of acquiring HIV. Long-acting cabotegravir for prevention and cabotegravir and rilpivirine for treatment are approved, but access remains an issue. And I'm sure we're going to have a robust discussion about access issues and cost and things just now. The ring is currently currently the only available long-acting method in most sub-Saharan African countries which have it approved. And the prospect of a 6 monthly subcut injectable PrEP, if found to work, will provide another option for people. And it's really crucial to consider equitable access of novel PrEP methods for those who need it the most. We are more than 10 years on from PrEP being available in South Africa, and we really need to just move a little bit faster with these other novel long-acting methods for both HIV and treatment. Thank you.
Wonderful. That was terrific. Just to clarify in everyone's minds what we're actually talking about, we now are going to launch straight into Sebastien Morin's talk. And Sebastien, again, a good friend. I met him first at the International AIDS Society. He's now at the Medicines Patent Pool. He's been there since 2019. His work in the policy space covers various disease areas, including HIV and TB, and various geographies, including Africa, Latin America, and the MENA region. He's the lead in pediatrics for the MPP and for the Global Accelerator for Pediatric Formulations, another very important aspect of his work. So we're going to hear virtually from Sebastien. He unfortunately had to be somewhere else in the world, so he lives mostly in Geneva, but he wasn't able to call in. So we will hear from him virtually, and straight over to Sebastien.
Hi, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to present some of our work today. My name is Sebastien Morin, and I work for the Medicines Patent Pool. We are based in Geneva. I'm going to talk to you today about the work that we do in licensing of intellectual property rights, as well as the updates and progress and what this means for Africa in terms of access to generic cabotegravir long-acting injectable for PrEP. So I have no conflict of interest to disclose, but I'd like to thank our funders, Unitate, but also the governments of Switzerland, France, Japan, and Germany. And of course, I thank the entire team, both in Geneva and some of our colleagues in Mumbai in India. So here's today's agenda. As I mentioned, I'd like to start with some introduction on patents, voluntary licensing, and other tools that MPP provides. And then I'm going to explain in more details the license for cabotegravir long-acting injectable for PrEP. I'm giving you an overview, provide you some update on the progress, and also giving you an outlook, an idea of the outlook for Africa. So first of all, the principle behind voluntary licensing is very simple. What we try to do is increase generic competition, which in turn will lower prices. Lower prices will lead to increased uptake of recommended medicines, such as from WHO guidelines, for example, and this will lead to health impact. We aim to do that faster, much earlier than patent expiry, and so we have this earlier, better access to optimal medicines. Licensing agreements are basically permissions that we negotiate with companies that develop medicines. These permissions allow generic manufacturers to enter the markets. So before going further, I'd like to just remind everyone of some of the basics of patents. So patents are given for a period of 20 years. They give exclusivity to the patent holder. Typically, the pharmaceutical companies will have patents on their medicines. These patents will be granted by national or regional patent offices. While there's a patent in place, generics will not be able to enter a certain market, which will lead very often to high prices. Once patent expires, we see generics coming in, lowering prices, which leads to increased uptake. So when there's a patent, there won't be these generic manufacturers able to come in, but with licensing agreements, we can change that. Of course, there's also another aspect to keep in mind. sometimes the patent landscape might differ from country to country. So as you see on the map here, this is an example with Cabellet that shows that there are patents in place in some countries, but not in all of them. In terms of the timelines for patent expiry of important products, we give a few examples here. For dolutegravir, which is first-line HIV treatment, as you know, the patent expires in 2026. That's when generics will be able to come in, irrespective of any agreement. But for a large number of low and middle-income countries, more than 130 countries, in fact, effectively, generics are able to come because there is a license. But for other countries, there's this timeline in place. For cabotegravir, the timeline is a bit longer because it's a novel product. The timeline is 2031. And for lenacapavir, for example, which is in the pipeline, the timeline is between 2034 and 2038, depending on the country and which patent we look at. So there are multiple scenarios for access to generic medicines. First of all, the first case is when there's no patent in a given country. So for example, sofosbuvir, but also the companion drug, the daclatasvir, were not patented in Egypt. And so many Egyptian companies have been able to develop generic versions, which has helped the country move towards elimination. In countries where there's no manufacturing capacity, however, the absence of a patent in that country might not be enough to allow access. We may need to look at countries of manufacture also. Second case is when patents have expired or they've been withdrawn or revoked. Examples of this, there are many in HIV. Some of these drugs are still in use today. Emtricitabine, lamivudine, tenofovir, for example, are not patented anymore. The patents have expired. So they're available in fully generic versions without any license needed. Third case is when medicine is still patented, but we want access earlier, and there's a license in place. There can be compulsory licenses. I'm not going to talk too much about that. These are when governments decide to allow access, irrespective of the agreement of the patent holder. There are some flexibilities that allow that in international legal frameworks. And then there's voluntary licenses, when a company will agree to give permission for generics to enter. This can be done bilaterally between companies themselves or through an organization like MPP. And the MPP licenses for dolutegravir and cabotegravir fall in that category. So what does it mean when a public health organization like MPP engages in voluntary licensing? Well, first of all, very importantly, MPP is a public health foundation. It's not a for-profit organization, and therefore the licenses that we negotiate will have this public health perspective as the primary characteristic. And so many of the provisions that we will include in our licenses may not exist in other agreements that companies strike between themselves. One key principle that we work towards is that while we want to expand access in a very large number of countries, as many as we can, we also don't want to make the situation worse for any other country. So that's this principle of doing no harm. And the last element that's very important is that MPP licenses are transparent. They are published in full on our website, which allows setting norms and standards for the field. And it's important to note that this is very new. In most cases, when we work with innovators, even universities and public research organizations, it's very new to them to publish agreements. But of course, signing the license is only one part of the whole access continuum. There's one step before signing a license, which is defining what's the priority. Once we identify public health priorities, then we chase companies and try to negotiate licenses that have the best clauses. And then we recruit generic manufacturers, and I'm going to talk about that a bit later. From then on, we work with the generics, but also with a range of stakeholders, including community groups, civil society, governments, global health agencies, procurement agencies, implementers, funders, to make sure that all the subsequent steps will take place in terms of getting the drugs from the manufacturers to the people's hands at the country level. There's many areas of work that will be covered. some by MPP, some by our partners, which often take the lead in many of these areas, including demand creation and treatment literacy or guidelines, for example. But we will engage with governments and civil society, as I do today, to give information, make sure that people are aware of opportunities that they could access these novel drugs at a very affordable price in many cases. What's very important to note, though, is that the licenses are often the starting point. And so in terms of setting new standards and norms, here's a list of the main areas. So before and since MPP, in the past, voluntary licensing in the HIV space was an exception. Now it's almost become the rule, and we like to believe that this will be the rule very soon. In the past, there was limited geographical scope for some of the few existing licenses. For example, one country for the efavirenz bilateral license. And now we see that geographical coverage for some of our licenses is very large, more than 100 countries in many, many cases. In the past, there might have been a limited number of licensees. Now we have licenses that are non-exclusive, which include a large panel of competitors. There might not have been transparency at all. Now licenses are made publicly available. There might have been problematic restrictions in the licenses, which would be, more commercial clauses, and now we have more public health terms and conditions. And there was limited visibility on the results and a lack of clarity on whether these licenses were in fact creating any impact. And now we know that we support the generics so that results take place and that we provide regular updates, as I will show in the next couple of slides. The Access to Medicine Foundation a couple of years ago, as they published their Access to Medicine Index, was saying that MPP and its voluntary licensing model had been one of the central independent drivers of access-oriented licensing in the pharma industries, and that the most pro-access criteria in agreed licenses have all, the companies that have the most pro-access criteria in these licenses have all negotiated agreements with MPP. So beyond the licensing agreements that we put in place, we also share a number of tools. We have databases that I show here. First of all, the biggest one is MedSpal. It's around patents and licenses of essential medicines, including all the HIV medicines on the market. So where you can find information at the country level, whether there's a patent in place, which patents matter the most, and whether there's a license. VaxPal is about vaccines for COVID-19. It's very specific. LayPal is for long-acting technologies, therapeutics, and medicines. And then we have also the interactive map and table, which give quarter by quarter, country by country information on access, supply, regulatory approval, and filings. And in these, the interactive map in particular allows to go back in time, quarter by quarter, to see how things have evolved. If you want to learn more about MPP, I invite you to look at the MPP strategy for 2023-2025. And we have also a number of peer-reviewed publications recently on impact in terms of economic and health benefits of our licenses, on applying this kind of approach to biologics, such as monoclonal antibodies, on long-acting HIV prevention and treatment, as well as on the negotiation and levers in place, and kind of the insider stories of MPP's work. So now let's talk about the MPP license for Kabele for PrEP. I'm going to give you an overview, talk about the progress, and talk about the outlook for Africa. So first of all, we announced that license last year at the AIDS conference in Montreal. It covers the patents for Kabele for the PrEP indication, so for pre-exposure prophylaxis. It allows 3 licensees to be recruited, which I'm going to talk about after. These licensees are Aurobindo, Cipla, and Mylan. They have been selected and announced earlier this year. They're all based in India, but Cipla has plans for manufacturing in Africa. We think that the development timeline from early 2023 was around 3 to 5 years. And so until that, these generics will be available at the country level, we will have access only through the originator product from Yvette Care. But it's still the time to start thinking about access right now. The license requires quality standards through pre-qualification at the WHO, but also SRA approval, such as through the FDA or EMA. Transparency, as usual, the license is fully available on our website. The license covers 90 countries that we see here in blue. These are all low-income countries, all lower middle-income countries, all sub-Saharan African countries, and all least developed countries. On top of this, there's a number of countries shown in violet, purple, that will be able to access, such as, for example, Libya in Africa, even if they are outside the territory. And that's because there's a clause in the license that allows supply if there's no patent in place. And so that really expands the access in a number of additional countries, as you can see on this map. Now, in terms of partnering with the generics, and as I mentioned, we selected 3 generics already. There's a process that we go through for this. It's important to explain it because it's also something that we do in the most objective way possible. We publish an expression of interest process whenever we have a license that's available. And then we will anonymize the applications, go through a blinded review with committees, both inside and outside MPP, which will look at the capacity, capabilities, track record, financial stability, R&D capacities, the regulatory compliance, and standards of the company, the specific plans for a particular product, the readiness with formulation technologies, and the past experience with MPP. For Cabernet, on top of all of this, we had also an on-site audit of the shortlisted candidates to make sure that they had the specific manufacturing capacity that they were claiming they had in terms of developing and manufacturing that product. Because we know Cabernet is a more complex product. It's an injectable, requires a few niche technologies that not all manufacturers may have had in the past. So we have started working with generics, and in the meantime, we also make available a number of additional resources. In LAPAL, we added some sections on clinical trials and implementation trials, so you can see for Cabernet, but also for other long-acting products such as lenacapavir, for example, that's in the pipeline, the progress in terms of the studies. You can also see the registration at the country level, for example, for cabotegravir, and we update that as soon as we hear of new information. We also published a paper in JIS as part of a special issue earlier this year, that includes a checklist of enablers of access to long-acting products in LMICs. There's also a video associated to that summarizes the key points from the paper. We also work with a number of partners, as usual, try to make sure that there's stakeholder coordination and synergies. In particular, we are involved in the LA PrEP Coalition, which is convened by UNITAID, WHO, UNAIDS, Global Fund, and PEPFAR, with the Secretariat at AVAC, looking at different pieces in areas of work where coordination is important. And of course, this includes also engagement with the community. Now, if we look at the outlook for Africa, as I mentioned before, here's a map. It's the same map as I've shown in blue and purple, but this one is taken from our Access to Medicine Tracker interactive map. And you can see for Africa, all of the continent is green, which means that all the countries will be able to access generic versions of that product when they become available. So in the meantime, there's 2 things that African countries can do to prepare themselves is continue expanding access to oral PrEP and also plan for the introduction of Cabernet for PrEP in anticipation of generic versions becoming available in a timeline of 3 to 5 years. We can also work towards increasing our collaboration, and we'll be happy from the MPP perspective to give more such presentations to talk about opportunities in terms of access to novel medicines. But we also want to learn from you and hear where your needs might be in terms of increasing competition for specific products, in terms of facing challenges such as quality issues, stockouts, registration delays, and others. So please do not hesitate to be in touch. We are a number of people working in the policy strategy and market access team where we can support you at the country level for any of these challenges. And with this, I'd like to end and thank you for your attention. I'm very sorry once again, I cannot be in Cape Town. I would have loved that, but I'll be happy to continue conversation through email and also have follow-up discussions as needed. Thanks a lot and enjoy the conference.
Thanks, huge thanks to Sebastien, who is passionate about this work. And I'm hoping some of that passion's going to infect all of you, because I think, it's technical, but it is about us, right? It's about Africa's self-care here. So I don't know if you guys know, we have some of the cheapest antiretroviral agents for treatment anywhere in the world. And that's been a mixture of two things. One, activism. We've driven down the price of these drugs, but second, generics. Generic companies have been allowed to come in and have been able to compete and drive the price down. Isn't it like that? If you go into the supermarket and there's only one kind of cereal, that cereal is going to be expensive, right? But if there are 3 boxes of cereal, they're going to be vying with each other. It's like ShopRite, Pick and Pay, they're vying to get the prices down. We're cheaper than those. That's exactly how it is with our drugs. So we need to be able to get these licenses out to many different drug makers so that the price comes down. Because if the price comes down, government buys it, government can give it to us in our clinics. Okay, so that's the simple equation. Now we're going to go up a level, because we're actually going to talk about those fancy broadly neutralizing antibodies. Now, I can frame this by letting you know that there are amazing biological agents being made every day in the world. Most of them are not coming to us in Africa, unfortunately. So these are monoclonal antibodies. They are natural responses that the human body makes to disease that manufacturers are now able to make in a factory so that they can be given to people. You don't have to make them, you get given them, and they work as if your body made them, right? It's quite a complex thought, but it's very exciting. Now, I want to tell you, again, we are at the back of the queue, and that's for multiple reasons. But I think HIV can bring us to the front of the queue, because now we're talking about broadly neutralizing antibodies or monoclonal antibodies, biologicals, whatever you want to call them. They are now being organized for HIV. And if there's any group who will not shut up, it is the HIV community. So we are not going to let the rest of the world get these very nice, important things, and we don't have access to it. So Shelly Malhotra is our next speaker. She's actually, I hope, online. Very, very good of her, because I know she's in Washington, D.C., or possibly New York at the moment, on the East Coast of America. So she's had to wake up very, very early. I'm just going to check with the guys at the back that she is online. She is. So let me introduce her briefly so she can get on with this. Thank you, Shelly, for joining us. She is the Executive Director of Global Access at the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative. She heads IAVI's efforts to ensure the affordability, availability, acceptability, and broad adoption of vaccine and therapeutic candidates, including broadly neutralizing antibodies. She leads IAVI's access strategy, policy engagement, stakeholder engagement. She's a fantastic, passionate individual who really cares about getting the best treatment to the most people. And so we're going to hand over to Shelly to tell us a little bit about this aspect of it, and then we'll bring it together in a panel and again ground it in reality here with us all. Over to you, Shelly.
Okay, I am trying to share my screen to project my slides. But it's that the host has disabled participant screen sharing. Should I email you my slides now?
No, I think they're going to let you do this.
Okay.
Hang on a bit with us. We love this global connectivity. It's coming. Okay, looks like we're winning.
Okay, I'm gonna email the slides, it looks like. So
Okay. Are you not winning, Gabriella? Oh, okay. Sorry.
all right, I probably should have done that last night.
Okay.
Okay, just a minute.
While you're doing that, I will introduce the panelists so that my voice can be less prominent in between. Are we? No, that looks like Sebastien. So, huge thanks to Yvette, Raphael, who's the co-founder and co-director of Advocacy for Prevention of HIV and AIDS, or APHA, in South Africa. She is here with us today. She's come to us from Joburg, where she's based. You've heard her voice already today, and always terrific input. She's a human rights activist with a focus on people living with HIV, young women, and LGBTQI communities. She became involved in HIV advocacy after she was diagnosed with HIV in 2000, as she mentioned earlier this morning. She is doing extraordinary work in terms of advocating not only for better care for people living with HIV, but also importantly to prevent HIV in others. And so Yvette is on our panel, but so is Bernard Kivuma. He's a research officer, medical director on HIV, AIDS, and tuberculosis in Tanzania. He has a special interest in preventive and treatment interventions, especially for key and vulnerable populations. And it covers HIV as well as other opportunistic infections. He's currently one of the fellows here. This is an IAVI-funded fellowship that we host at the Desmond Tutu, really to promote and advocate for more involvement in adolescent programming and research. So he'll be sharing his perspective on access in Tanzania when we get to the panel section. But I'm hoping Shelly's slides have arrived. Gabriella? Not yet. Oh my.
They'll come.
Okay. Don't go away, Shelly. We're going to handle a question while we're doing this. So I have one concern related to injectable PrEP on social media advocacy. I've seen unclear messaging where it's reported as though the injectable PrEP is available in the public domain and not through clinical trials. What can be done to bridge this gap, especially on social media? And we may be responsible for that. And Bali, I'm wondering if you want to come and talk about your strategy around PrEP, to put you on the spot ahead of time. Come and talk here if you like. So the question is, we're already talking about PrEP, Cabernet PrEP, as if it's available. Is that creating a expectation gap?
Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Umbali Jonas. So within Fast PrEP, we have a study that's Prepared to Choose, right? And with Prepared to Choose, it's basically offering the three HIV prevention products, which is oral PrEP, the Dapiring, as well as the CAB-LA, right? So we do know that the 2-month injection is on the way. So, and we also do realize that our participants, and this is through the youth reference groups that we have with them, that it's a product that they're looking forward to. And so in terms of timelines, I'm not yet sure when it will be available in South Africa, but it's definitely coming. And so online, in terms of the messaging, we always make sure to say that it's coming soon. It's not here yet, but it's something to look out for.
And there's always a lag, isn't there? I mean, we think everyone in the world's talking about Cabernet because we are, but that doesn't mean other people are. What's your sense of people's awareness?
So people's awareness, I think from the Fast PrEP point of view, our participants are very excited. They cannot wait to have the CAB-LA. And with regards to the messaging, for now, what I've been doing on my side is just to emphasize on the 2-month injection, that it's like you get your injection for 2 months and you don't have to kind of go to the clinic, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. So I think, yes, I see we're ready. I think it's an important question, and maybe we can come back to this, Yvette, is expectations and, how long have we been hoping for an HIV vaccine? decades, right? So it's expectations versus spreading the word and getting awareness going. It's a fine line. It's a tension. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit more in the panels. Great question, though. Right, Shelly, you are up. Your slides are there. We're handing over to you, ma'am.
Great, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so I will be providing a bit of a very high-level overview of BNABs and how they're being studied for prevention and treatment, and then dive deeper into some of the access challenges that we've seen and how we're hoping to address them moving forward. So, I think there's been a bit of mention of BNABs, but BNABs are monoclonal antibodies that can neutralize a broad diversity of HIV isolates. And this graphic here highlights some of the different areas of the HIV virus that BNABs attack that are highlighted in different colors here. And passive immunization, as Linda-Gail mentioned, is when BNABs are provided to somebody rather than their own immune system producing them. Okay. And as mentioned, BNABs are addressing targeting different parts of the HIV virus. And in red are the names of some of the different BNABs that are in development that are targeting, different parts of the virus here. Okay. And so when we think of BNABs and what their potential addition is to the HIV toolbox, we're looking in terms of the product profile of a product that can be administered quarterly or perhaps semi-annually, in a discrete manner, ideally, at routine healthcare visits. And we are hoping that this could improve adherence, the longer half-life of the BNABs. They're generally safe and well tolerated in clinical studies. And those antibodies that are on the market, we are excited about their potential for use in a few populations, particularly in infants and in pregnant women, given their safety profile. And also we think there could be interest in that they're not used in treatment, so they're novel, and there's not the same concern about potential for inducing resistance as a result. In particular, we're very excited about the potential use of BNABs for preventing both peri and postnatal transmission of HIV to infants. I mentioned that they generally have a good safety and PK profile, and this has also been confirmed in some of the infant studies. They've been already tested in infants, a few of the different antibodies. And the infant macaque studies, the animal studies, seem to suggest that they could be effective even post-exposure. So not just to prevent HIV, but post-exposure if given, at birth. Excuse me. Infants have a very defined period of risk during breastfeeding. And so the thinking is that if we could give infants a few doses of BNABs during that breastfeeding period, that could prevent HIV, for many years. During that risk period, it could have a long-term benefit. The current approaches for addressing infants during this breastfeeding period are limited. And we talked about the high price of BNABs, and I'll discuss that a bit more. But the dose and some of the administration barriers. But the dose is small in infants, and it can be given through an injection, which is easier to deliver, less expensive to deliver, and also means lower dose, lower cost of good. We're hoping that this could be integrated in with other routine immunizations during for ease of delivery. And the fact that they are not ARV based maybe could avoid some concerns around resistance. Again, I mentioned that they could be lower cost. There's been some analysis of the cost effectiveness of BNABs when implemented in this way, and which suggests that it could be cost effective in the settings of highest prevalence if rolled out, in the same manner that we roll out routine vaccinations to every infant. And this analysis in particular was in South Africa. in settings of the highest prevalence. And in settings of lower prevalence, if it was rolled out in HIV-exposed infants specifically. And just to say that this is not an area that's receiving a lot of attention for product developers, this infant indication for some of the other pipeline products. And so this is a bit of a neglected target group that we're hoping that we can address with BNABs. And each year there's 3.24 million babies directly at risk, either because they live in a high incidence setting, very high incidence setting, or because they are HIV exposed. And this has been designated as a priority pipeline intervention by WHO. So a bit more on what we know about BNABs. So the AMP study was mentioned, and this study did show some evidence of protective efficacy against viruses that were sensitive. And it provided the general proof of concept. So, it was 75% efficacious against sensitive viruses. And it also validated that in vitro viral susceptibility could be an accurate predictor of preventive efficacy. And it's helping to establish a neutralization surrogate endpoint, a PT80, which we are hoping could be used in the future to reduce the need for large and costly efficacy trials. But it's important to note that VRC01 used alone afforded very limited protective efficacy against the circulating strains. And it really highlighted the fact that we're going to have to use antibodies in combination to provide adequate protection. And this is just a quick overview of some of the prevention trials underway. And as you can see, they're using combinations, and they're looking at BNABs either used subcutaneously or in intravenous form. And I won't go into all these trials, but just to say that there is a robust pipeline of clinical trials looking at this prevention indication, and also the trials looking at this infant indication, multiple trials ongoing. And I wanted to highlight that the next generation of BNABs is even significantly more potent and offers broader neutralization potential against clade C virus. And this is kind of trying to summarize that. So, the antibodies have now been engineered so they can have even more potency and also longer half-life of 3 to 6 months. And on the right, so on the left, you can see some of the earlier generation antibodies that are offering quite limited coverage protection against some of the circulating clade C virus. On the right, however, you see in vitro susceptibility of a potency of the triple combination is quite high. So, we're working on the BNABs to make them more potent. Additionally, several BNABs are being tested for therapy, and this is typically in combination with ARVs or other vaccine candidates. And this is a snapshot of some of those ongoing studies. And just to summarize what we are seeing in the literature from these studies that are looking at the potential use of BNABs in treatment. In the clinical studies that have taken place, most individuals who switch from standard ARV therapy to BNAB treatment, combinations of at least 2 BNABs do demonstrate some ability to suppress viremia. And that's really linked to the sensitivity of the BNABs and to maintaining adequate plasma levels. That's key to therapeutic effect. Combinations of BNABs with injectable ARVs are being developed with the aim of having twice annual administration to maintain viral suppression. And there are additional interventions that combine BNABs with immune modulators and therapeutic vaccines that are being investigated as cure strategies. But as Linda-Gail alluded to, this vision is not going to be realized unless we can address some of the barriers that have existed in access to monoclonal antibodies globally. And what this graphic highlights is that, 80% of antibody use and access is in a few high-income countries, the US, Canada, Europe, countries in Europe. But 80% of the world lives outside of these settings. So there's a huge disconnect between where these innovations could be needed and where they are now. And less than 1% of global sales of antibodies are occurring in Africa. And this is due to many barriers, and I will discuss a few of them. One, the product profiles of these products, they're not being optimized for use in resource limited settings. I'm not talking about the engineered antibodies I just showed you, but some of the other antibodies, they require intravenous use, which can add to the delivery costs. The business models that have been set up for how these products are commercialized have not been conducive to access. Sebastien talked about voluntary licensing. There's very limited licensing of monoclonal antibodies in resource limited settings, which is leading to the high cost as well. There are real challenges in terms of mAbs manufacturing that lead to higher production costs that are being addressed through various strategies now for the next generation products. And there are challenges around the pricing strategies. They're currently priced quite exorbitantly, particularly where they're available in the high income settings. And so in order to move towards access to antibodies, we're going to have to address several of these barriers. So, some of the strategies that at IAVI we're advancing. One, I mentioned optimizing antibodies for high potency and low dose, and this can reduce the overall cost of goods. The next generation antibodies, some of them are up to 100 times more potent, and this therefore allows to lower the dose by orders of magnitude, which brings down the cost. We're only looking at IAVI at antibodies that can be delivered through injection. We don't believe that intravenous is a strategy that is viable in most of the world. And so that's another way in which we can bring down the cost of delivery. We're also looking at partnership strategies, partnering with low-cost manufacturers and having access conditions built into the terms of those partnerships to help bring the cost down. And then some of the innovations, there's innovations that have been aiming to bring down the cost of goods, either through large-scale manufacturing or through decentralized modular manufacturing. There's different strategies that are being pursued. And of course, we have to have a commitment to affordable pricing in whatever we do. I wanted to call out that, we have been working with Desmond Tutu and other partners to bring together a group of passionate stakeholders, a task force that's working to address and to think early in development about some of these potential barriers to access, as well as other considerations that are going to be important to both accelerate the clinical development as well as the availability of BNAbs. So the task force that we have convened, it's looking at things like, what's the clinical development pathway and some of the enabling science. But it also is looking at what's the regulatory pathway. How can we engage the global regulatory community to make sure that these products are available and licensed in a timely fashion? Community engagement, how can we employ good participatory practice in our clinical development programs, build trust with communities, have clear communication, and make sure that we have good alignment on the ethical aspects of the trials. Advocacy, how can we raise awareness and generate political will and accountability to close gaps in the prevention cascade, not just against BNAbs, future BNAbs, but against current options. And then on the manufacturing and post-approval access side, how can we be working now to ensure that the products are made in a way that's affordable with a low cost of good, and that we have a strategy for timely access? And this is just a snapshot of some of the partners that have been participating in the task force that I mentioned. And if any of you are interested in participating, we'd love to have you. And Linda-Gail can pass along the information for how you can join the discussions. And I guess with that, I just wanted to thank our funders and to thank you all for the opportunity to present. Thank you very much.
Very much, Shelly. Great. I'm going to ask, thanks, Shelly. That was terrific. I hope you heard the applause. And we really appreciate you bringing this important topic into the room. Also, the important topic of preventing HIV in unborn children and newborn children. Now, how does this relate to an adolescent program? One of the key places where vertical transmission is still continuing is in unintended pregnancy in young women living with HIV or who become HIV infected because we as healthcare workers miss opportunities to test them and to offer either antiretrovirals because they're living with HIV or pre-exposure prophylaxis because they're at risk of HIV exposure. And half of the 130,000 children born every year, newly infected with HIV, are in women who become infected either right just before birth or during breastfeeding. So there are real opportunities, one, to offer PrEP, enhance our vertical transmission programs to offer ARVs and protect babies. And so what you've been hearing about today is you just need a dose in a baby, right? Tiny little dose, much cheaper because only a little bit. And we can offer it like a vaccine to all of these children who are at risk in areas where we know there's a lot of transmission. And that is the advocacy for that work that we're trying to encourage at the moment. Okay, so Shelly did a great job. So on our panel today, is Sheetal still here? Sheetal joined just to answer any hard questions on biomedical products. I know Yvette's also very, and of course, Bernard's there as well, but let's just compliment. Sebastien isn't going to join us. Shelly is still with us, but I'm going to start with you, Yvette. Reflect a little bit on what you've heard today with your very strong advocate lens, and just tell us, how does what you've just heard today leave you feeling?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the kind introduction, LGB. What I've heard is that because we're working with AGYW and adolescents, I think we are doing something for them. And can I do what I'm famous for? Because the room is depressing me. I think we should say, when we do talk about new HIV prevention, that we are doing for us. There's something that we do in advocacy, and we talk about lived experiences, but we also speak about internalizing what you are doing, because we all have young people at home. So it's not us doing this and that and programs for young people. We are doing it for the future of South Africa. We are doing it for the future of the world. So we heard a lot about some of these, methods and what's available, and, BNABs. We've heard about Kebele, we heard about U equals U, but I still feel we think these methods are for some people. So I'd like us to stand up. Just quickly for my part, because advocacy, we've learned from the early days of treatment action campaign that messages only make sense if we can relate to them. So how is U equals U? That's U equals U. So when we sing, we're going to say U equals U. Kebele, what is unique about Kebele? Kebele is the fact that we get it by the bum, right? So if anything, you need to tell a young person, it's going to be an injection. And the deputy, what is unique about it? It is, ne? So let's go. On your marks, down. Get set. We are ready for U equals U. On your marks, get set. We are ready for Kebele. On your marks, Get set. We are ready for tapering. Now, I don't want to sing alone. If we don't all sing together after my presentation, you won't remember. So on your marks, all of us, on your marks, get set. We are ready for you equals you. On your marks, get set. We are ready for Kebele. We are ready. We are ready for Kebele. On your marks, get set. We are ready for tapering. Thank you. So just to say, LGB, all of these methods are not foreign, are not as biomedical as we want it to sound. And sometimes our biomedical language makes young people think, this is not for me. What is tapering? Where is this Kebele? When you give me an injection, what's going to happen to me? So I think we need to just bring down the language, make sure young people know what is available and not to forget what is already there. You know, the methods that we mentioned are new. They're not even readily available. We should not forget about what young people can access today. And they have not really changed since me and Carl worked on Scrutinize, since we worked on so many things. But when last did you hear a condom message on television? When last did you hear somebody influential talking about testing for HIV? So we're not really moving forward with our messaging and how we can affect young people. It's almost like advocates are doing this alone. I saw Debo being excited because this is our daily lives. But we need to ensure we bring our communities with us to understand what this means. And we work so much and so hard to ensure policymakers take us serious because this is important. There's no reason why Kebele cannot become available to the women and the people on site at DTHF. The people who participated in the studies are supposed to get them. So before I take over, I'll allow other people.
Let's hear how things are in Tanzania.
Yes, thank you, Yvette, for a very engaging conversation. Yeah, so for Tanzania, my experiences, I have been working at a rural HIV facility for almost 3 years now. But we are blessed in the sense that we managed to have a lot of partnerships that have been helpful in making sure that we have HIV prevention in where I practice. But generally for Tanzania, the method of HIV prevention that has been approved so far is the PrEP, the oral PrEP, that was approved in 2020. Pretty late, but we are getting there. But the Prevering ring as well as CAB for injection is still under review. So the main challenge we have is limited options for prevention. But one thing that has been going on really well is the issue of advocacy. AVAC has been doing a lot of advocacy work, especially for the Prevering ring as well as Kabele for PrEP. So we expect good news soon. Yeah, but we are still getting there. Yes.
So now is the time for questions generally. So I'd like you to be thinking what your questions are. Maybe there's more clarity around some of the access questions or anything, whatever you want to ask. There is one question out already. I'm going to pose it. Maybe, I don't know if it's, anyway, let me pose it and whoever feels up to answer it can. Shelly, I think you showed the long-term suppression in the face of 2B NABs. And the question is, can you then abandon antiretrovirals? So I don't know if you want to or Sheetal or somebody else pick that up. Quite happy. If you want to give it a go, Shelly, it was in your talk, but I know you're not a clinical manager, so I exceed that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was with respect to the treatment overview, and I think that was in the context, it was not long-term suppression. I think it was in the context of an treatment interruption study in which they withdraw the ARVs for a temporary period and administer BNAbs to see if there could still be some viral suppression. And in that context, combination of two BNAbs can still maintain viral suppression in that particular setting. So it wasn't long-term suppression. It was in the context of a study in which they were temporarily removed. And it's, again, just kind of building the evidence that perhaps they could suppress, but further, longer-term clinical trials are needed to confirm that.
Thank you, Shelly. Perfect. Sheetal, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, so just know that question, we can't abandon ARVs completely. HIV cure research is a thing and it's ongoing, and I think BNAbs are part of it, but we have to, like Shelly said, it's in the context of controlled clinical trials where people are already on ARVs, stop their treatment, get administered BNAbs, and have frequent, if 2 weekly to 1 monthly viral load monitoring.
Yeah.
So we can watch if the virus, if you become unsuppressed, we immediately start ARVs again. So trials are still early, but it is quite promising and exciting in terms of treatment.
Great. Thank you. Right. Question here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I think I'm tall enough, everyone can see me. I'm sorry for being late, but my question is around, so for example, with the injectable ART, especially the KBLA, in terms of, because in South Africa, there's a lot of policy writing and all of those things. How far are we in terms of that research and also trying to inform policy in terms of the NIMA trained professional people? Because that's the shortage that we currently have in the country. Because if you're not NIMA trained, then you cannot administer or do anything around HIV and AIDS. And then also Auntie Yvette, that's how we call her. Auntie Yvette, in terms of the advocates, especially around the KBLA and also the DEPI ring, in terms of things coming into the country, being tested onto our people, and then they go out, and then when they come back very expensive. So in terms of that, what in terms of advocacy has been happening in terms of that, in just making sure that the prices are being dropped down and the country is able to afford such things as they've been tested throughout in the country. And then also, it's in relation to the daily AD-PrEP pill that goes together with the injectable PrEP, to understand what is it really that we're trying to understand between the two, between the injectable PrEP and also the daily intake of the PrEP pill. And then also in terms of adherence, in terms
One more. Just to give someone else a chance to come.
And then in terms of the adherence in relation to that, because we'd assume that young people like myself, I'll make an example with me, like myself, I would think that the 6-month injectable PrEP is protecting me, then why do I still need to take the daily AD pill? Yeah.
All right. Okay. So Sheetal, I think if you can handle that last one, while we just, let's see if there are others. There's another one at the back there, but those were a load of questions. So starting with Auntie Yvette, I think.
Thank you so much, Sebastien. And I think what you raise is an important point around, especially around treatment and the fact that historically South Africa's treatment program was on efavirenz, and KBLA does consist of efavirenz? No, cabotegravir, but the injectable treatment that is available has some form of medication that makes it not, I don't want to say it's not desirable for us as a country or as Africa because of the high numbers of people already who are, resistant to efavirenz. What looks amazingly something that we would advocate for, we also know that sometimes we advocate for stuff that we never get, the things that we talk about. So what looks very promising for us, LGB, is lenacapavir and the future for HIV treatment and long-acting in that sense. What we've done with advocacy with the young women that you know we are working with, who are the ground forces that are over almost everywhere, including some of the partners like DTHF, AEDCM, Tongeni, is that we've advocated for these medicines to be part of a basket. And we've also worked with the MPP, right? So we work with them to ensure that at least licensing happens, at least we start talking about, you know, these property rights, the IP rights that some of these organizations have. And we can see that we literally have appointed three generic companies to actually do generics for Kebele, which will still be a long process. I want us as advocates also to think about how do we ensure we push for that, because pharmaceutical companies like to work with us, but they're not really sometimes open to us. And there's an expectancy that we create when these things become available or are in trials, and that makes us not look so good to our communities. And with the deppering and some of the advocacy and the pricing, we know our governments in Africa, and I think it's the same case with you in Tanzania, will never afford some of these medications at the high prices that they are. We can create the demand, but what do we do for pharmaceutical companies also to think around not human lives and not profits? I think the problem here is profits, and how do they think around, you know, some of creativity of making this medication so much easier. Viv's big issue is that this medication is difficult to make and so sophisticated. Then why test it? Why did you come here if this treatment is not supposed to? And inequality plays a huge role. Inequity plays a huge role. We hear the executive director of UNH talk about this, because sometimes I think these treatments are done in our communities not with us in mind. And we need these medications in our country and in our communities. Thanks.
Thanks, Yvette. I'll ask Sheetal just to respond. I'll come back to you, Bernard. We have a question for Shelly as well, so maybe keeping an eye on lunch coming. Keep answers short, if that's okay, Sheetal.
Yeah. So I just wanted to touch on what Yvette said about the CAB and rilpivirine. It is an issue that rilpivirine can have that sort of a resistance or intolerance, but it doesn't mean that our population doesn't need it. As Yvette said, we need options, right? So we need to continue advocating for that group of people that could benefit from CAB and rilpivirine. I can answer the question about the daily. Do you want me to answer that question now?
Please.
Yeah, daily PrEP versus injectable PrEP. So in this trial, in the purpose studies, lenacapavir is given as a 6-monthly injection. And the point of it is a randomized control trial in the beginning. So the whole point is that we need to prove that len works as good as oral PrEP in preventing HIV. So that unfortunately for the first year, you have to either take your PrEP pill and you have to take your injections because you don't know which active product you're getting. Again, it's in a controlled clinical trial environment, so we can really push adherence, we can support people with adherence. And the ultimate outcome will be, hopefully, that len is as good as Truvada, and then we can stop taking our daily pill. The other thing is that if you stop your len injection, there's what we call a long PK tail phase, where the level of the lenacapavir in the body drops, and if you get HIV in that time, you're prone to resistance. So we're asked to cover you with oral PrEP during that time if you decide to stop your injection. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, so, you know, important to know that hence the need for us to practice, if you like, and understand how we're going to use these products in the time while we're waiting for them to come. So let's not waste the time we have to learn those questions. Question for you, Shelly, and it's an insightful one. We've always used nevirapine, one of the antiretroviral agents, to prophylax in vertical transmission to the baby. Is that not working? Is that why are we thinking about something else at the moment?
Okay. So nevirapine does work. But what we are hoping for is a strategy that might be a little bit easier to administer. You know, because the BNABs have a long half-life. So if we could use a BNAB, maybe we could give a few doses over the course of, you know, the whole breastfeeding period. So now, you know, the way nevirapine is being used, typically it's in the early period of breastfeeding for, I think, you know, 6 weeks daily. And that can be quite challenging for mothers to administer, or for caregivers to administer in the context of having a newborn, of being tired, of, you know, just hard physically to administer. And so we think that maybe the BNABs could offer a benefit in that way too, of being easier to administer and long acting. So maybe even, you know, easier to adhere to as well.
Maybe just in case you're thinking, I see a question at the back. Can someone go? There's a question there and a question there. While the mics are going to you, Pippa, I'm just going to say, maybe you're thinking, oh, this sounds like, you know, sci-fi. Right at this moment, in Spain, every single baby that is born is being given an antibody against RSV. Now, RSV is also, so that's the thing that makes our babies get croup early on in their life. That's like a pneumonia that puts them in hospital and makes them very ill. And we've just had a big outbreak of it because post-COVID, there wasn't a lot of RSV. It's come back. In Spain, every baby is getting 1 shot of a monoclonal antibody to prevent RSV. So it's not a foreign, that's also a virus. It's not HIV, but it's a concept that we can adapt here. That's what we're saying. How can we learn and bring HIV into the plan here? So thanks, Shelly. Pippa, where's the mic? Ladies, where are you?
No.
Oh.
Can
I ask you just to keep it short because we want to get, thanks.
So it's with great interest that we're discussing PrEP and administration of PrEP. The one thing that I am concerned about is that, and this is based on experience from a couple of our adolescents who we've asked about their experience at a site where they wanted to access PrEP. So much to our dismay, we found that the healthcare workers were actually very negative about wanting to administer PrEP on their request. So much to the extent where they were actually bad-mouthing these girls and telling them to stop being promiscuous. So I feel that a lot of education needs to be done within our healthcare workers sector. And as a healthcare worker myself, I find that, you know, sometimes you need to get nurses who understand what adolescents are about and appreciate that they are youth who have ideas of their own and need to make their own decisions. So instead of smothering them with trying to be their mother, we should be nurturing them into accepting their decisions.
Thank you. I think that just, we wholeheartedly endorse that attitude. That's quite correct.
Hi, everyone. Just a quick update on the ring and responding to the question about advocacy and availability. Just to say thanks to all the advocates. It was approved in South Africa, we know, March 2022. Department of Health provided some guidelines for us they were signed up in December. And as from August this year, we have been rolling it out in some of our clinics in the Klipfontein, Mitchells Plain district. In fact, those are mobile clinics. Yesterday, I was at a City of Cape Town clinic, also in that area. They're going to start rolling out the DAPI ring. Tomorrow, I'm going to another one. So thanks to all the advocates here, the DAPI ring is now becoming available in South Africa in our communities.
Brilliant. So when I see you walking like this, I'll know what it's about, right? That's great. Okay. Is there another? I saw another hand, I thought. No? Any other? Okay. Any other burning questions anybody wants to ask around how MPP works, how we can possibly get access, what we can do. Here's a question, trying to.
Thanks a lot. I think this is actually a question for Shelly. But I was just thinking in terms of your brief, which is for global vaccine access, has South Africa approached you at all for other vaccines access and patents on our APHA program? Because I believe that we're like the one of few sub-Saharan countries that actually pay for its own APHA program, whereas some other countries are mainly donation reliant. And if we're talking about sustainability, the sustainability part will only come when we actually have the infrastructure and the expertise and the manufacturers in place who've already practiced on other vaccines and production for things that we maybe assume as routine. So I'm just wondering, how are we going to straddle that huge leap for new in the future, something coming, but there are actually opportunities that we might or could harness with us now that could actually be cost saving for governments. And if South Africa has actually approached you for any of those. Thanks.
Sorry, so if I understand correctly, it's a question about whether we've been working or discussing with the government of South Africa in terms of access to future vaccines, or is it vaccines that are available now? Sorry, just to clarify.
Sorry, no, there are vaccines that are available already. So even the RSV monoclonal antibody that Linda-Gail mentioned, have we actually gone and approached you for production of that? But it's actually our existing EPI program that we pay for as a country.
EPI.
EPI, yeah, our expanded program of immunization at our own cost. But we could actually be creating a learning curve by producing for ourselves.
It's in country or on continent manufacturing, Shelly.
Yes. So IAVI ourselves, we're very passionate about advocating for access, not just to the antibodies that we're developing and that we're pursuing, but more broadly. So we do believe that if you could pave the way with access to antibodies for RSV, there's antibodies for cancer, that could help gain experience in the region, and also define the regulatory pathways and how you roll these out. That all is going to help support eventual access to the antibodies that we're working on eventually, which are more focused on HIV. So I think we very much agree with the model that you're describing of trying to identify manufacturers that are low cost, that are regionally based, that could gain experience manufacturing antibodies. And I think part of what we've been discussing with Linda-Gail and this task force that we've helped to coordinate is, who are those companies? What's going to be needed to build their capacity, and what's going to be needed to make it sustainable, because they're going to have enough demand for their products so that they don't go out of business. So we're trying to think through what are some of the strategies that we could do now to help support that vision that you just described of locally produced, affordable antibodies. We're definitely not there yet, but we're trying to raise awareness and think about how we set it up that way from the start. So it's very, very good point. Thank you.
And I think just to add on that, what we've seen during COVID was how we were cut off from the rest of the world. So self-sufficiency became a very important byword, self-reliance. So the Africa CDC is picking up on that as well. So is WHO. What that talks about, we like to talk about self-reliance as individuals. I think Yvette spoke beautifully about that. We want self-care and self-reliance, but even governments and countries need to be self-reliant. And so this is, and we know that when we were charged with making mRNA, within 4 months, Afrigen had made an mRNA vaccine, right? So there is a huge push to say, can we bring this kind of manufacturing onto the continent? And South Africa is obviously important there, but there are other important countries doing great work. And so I think we are at a very important time when this may happen. And I think the other thing you've alluded to, which is important, the other way we can get these products is via donors and donor agencies. And Gavi, we are excluded by Gavi. Gavi is like the PEPFAR of vaccines. We are excluded because we are now a high middle income country. And so that leaves us out of that opportunity. So yes, more than ever, we now need to say, how do we become self-reliant? So I think we kind of coming to the end of this session. I'm going to ask the panelists Anna set us up to do this. I'm going to ask each of you just to comment about, what do you think is the most important take home today about access here's a disclaimer. I have not for a moment suggested the biomedical product standalone. There's everything we spoke about this morning wraps around them, but we wanted to have a session around what's new on the horizon in terms of these drugs. But please don't walk away from here saying, all I need to do is get this PrEP pill. It's the PrEP pill plus everything else we talked about today, right? Or this treatment is no good if a young woman feels stigmatized when she walks into a clinic or can't go to a clinic because of that. So it's everything else. But around this access question, what is the take home that you would like us to walk away with? And I'll start, Shelly, with you since it's early for you in the morning.
I think the one takeaway message is that it is possible, and there is a way that we can make these products widely available, but we have to be strategic and we have to start early. And we can't just expect for it to happen on its own. And so, the advocacy that Linda-Gail mentioned, but also, being smart about how we build in those safeguards and those plans early in development, and holding to account product developers, and making sure that as they're advancing clinical trials, they have a strategy for how the products are going to be accessible, and not just thinking about it once the products are there.
Correct. Sheetal?
Yeah. Is this on?
We need a mic.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think my take home would be similarly that it's up to us as NGOs, as trialists, and to continue advocating. But apart from that, we need to engage our healthcare sector early on while we're doing these trials to see how feasible it would be to implement these things in the clinic. We know we can do contraceptives, we know we can do contraceptive choice, and we need to be able to do prevention choice. And I'd like to close off by saying the youth voice is the loudest. It has been the loudest in our country. We have a history of where youth advocates have done so much for us. So I think this is an exact platform to say, this is where we need to start advocating, and this is where we need to start engaging people.
Great. Yvette?
Thank you so much. I think for me, I want to recognize some of the structural issues and drivers that young people face. Also, there was a presentation made this morning around the high number of teenage pregnancy. I'd like us to also start by naming these things. The numbers of HIV, of teen pregnancies have risen. What's the numbers of rape? We need to really take into account that young people, LGBT, you said it so beautifully, young people just need to be young people. I don't remember having to stress about this when I was a young person. They need to be young people. It's our responsibility to ensure that they get into a future that's free of HIV. And the best thing we can do is to advocate for this basket, the choice manifesto. What does it mean? What does it entail? And I say we need not to walk away from things that are aspirational. If you aspire to something, like you say, Shelly, is for us to dream of a world where young people can just be young people, not worried about PrEP, injection. You see, all of those signs I made, the Bekker, all of those things needs to be part of when you grow up, you go to the clinic, you make a choice where I am in my life and what do I want to have available. Governments have the responsibility, LGB, to ensure that these medicines become available. We all have responsibilities to ensure young people don't have a problem called HIV. It's enough with us. It cannot be another young person's story. It has to end with me.
Yeah, I love it. Last word, Bernard.
Yes, I believe that the previous speakers have said enough, but what I would like to add on is that we need to do this work thinking of choice in mind, and we need to make sure that we are able to offer all available options for prevention so that we leave the end user to be at a place where they can make a decision on what they really want. And one of the very great initiatives that happens currently is the involvement of community advisory boards in trials and in this kind of research work, where we need to have diverse advisory board that has key populations, that have people with disabilities, that have adolescents and young people also involved in the trials, so that we make sure that at the end, when we have the result, we know how it's going to be accepted by the end users.
Great. So thank you for a wonderfully lively, provocative, but also I think informative session. I learned stuff I didn't know. I hope you did. Maybe it's still a bit murky, but keep engaging. I think there were some wonderful resources put up. Ask around, network, check in, check your understanding. Maybe somebody can help with the clarity if we just keep talking. And I want to end on something, a rememory. Which I'm allowed to do because when you get old, you look back and you tell stories, right? We heard that this morning from Zanelli. But when we first had a youth camp, we asked them, what are you going to call yourselves? And this was 2003, I think, or 4. What are you going to call yourselves? And they said, we're going to call ourselves the future fighters. And we said, why? And they said, because our parents fought for their freedom. We fight for our future. And I think that's beautiful. And I absolutely agree that we don't take anything away from young people in that, but we come right behind them. We stand with them. We're at your shoulder. We're pushing from behind. When you need a water boy, I'll be there to put the water for you, whatever. But you guys need to fight for your futures, and we are right behind you. So thanks again to everyone. It is lunchtime. Yay. Well done for hanging in there. Melissa, are you going to tell us where? And we have Shelly. Thank you so much. Go and enjoy breakfast. We appreciate you being here. Melissa.
Okay. All right. So we've now got lunch, and it's not in the same place where you've been having tea. If you just go through there, you'll find the restaurant area, and there's a section that's closed off for us to have lunch in. And then if everyone could come back here at 2:00, and then I will share some information about the workshop, the workshops and the